Welcome back to the Corner of Story and Game, where we explore the art, science, and surprise of storytelling through play. Today I'm once again joined by the multi-talented performer, producer, and designer Ryan Omega, who's back to talk about a project that pushes the boundaries between game, play, and theater. Taskmaster LA. This isn't just a fan spin-off or a tabletop homage. It's a designed experience that was playtested, cast, structured, and iterated for the specific challenge of being both fun to play and fun to watch. And that's our focus today. What does it take to design and playtest a game for performance? What makes a challenge readable or emotionally engaging or broadcast-worthy? And what lessons can game writers and designers learn from this process? So let's dig into it. Ryan, thanks for joining me once again.
Thank you for having me back. I'm so excited.
I am too. I want to pick your brain today about a whole bunch of different things, but mostly I saw Taskmaster LA, and I want to talk to you about that, what you learned there, and how that applies to other things involved in game design. But before we get started, like always, I like to get a little bit of your origin story. You've worn a lot of hats. You've done a lot of things. So how did you get into the whole gaming, writing, designing, running games, and what drew you into the hybrid space that is what we're going to end up talking about?
So, Taskmaster LA has a very specific origin. One of my friends, Sam, on Facebook wrote, "I wish someone could run Taskmaster for me so I could play it." And I didn't know what that was. So I clicked the link and I got obsessed with it. I binge watched several seasons and I realized if there was one thing that I could do for the rest of my life, it's this type of show, because it has everything that I want to do. It has videos, it has games, it has challenges, it has comedy, it has a lot of personality. It's my marmalade because it's more than just my jam.
Nice. I like that.
And I thought in the back of my head, I'll run this someday. But then an actual opportunity came. So my friend Donna, who's the owner of Geeky Tees, which is one of the largest gaming stores on the West Coast, sent me a message saying, "I would like you to run the first show from the media room when the new store opens." So that's a lot of pressure and a lot of trust and a lot of privilege. And I realized, oh, I guess this was meant to be. I guess I have to run this. And because Sam was the inspiration for this, I made her my first contestant, the first person who I cast. It was also important to note that during this time, LA was in an economic recession affected by the fact that we just had two strikes, the writer strike and the actor strike, and it halted production for a year. And work was not happening in LA, and people were losing jobs and work. And I realized I needed something to keep me creatively occupied. So I thought if I put all of my energy into making this fun thing, I would rather do that than be afraid of not finding work. However, I will say Taskmaster LA is the hardest thing I have ever made. It is the hardest thing because, okay, let me detail you what it involves. First, you have to cast the group, and then you have to schedule the video show. So if you've ever tried to bring a group together for a TTRPG game, like a Dungeons and Dragons game, you already know how hard that is. Then you have to make the challenges, play test them to make sure they're appropriate, coordinate the shoot the challenge videos, edit all of the challenge videos, then schedule a live stage performance that has to coordinate with Geeky Tees availability and everybody else's availability. Again, a second D&D game that you have to schedule, coordinate and shoot the live, let people know that the live is there so that there is an audience, edit all of that, subtitle it for accessibility because I subtitle all my stuff, and then upload it to YouTube and pray that people watch it. That is a 2.5 to 4 month timeline for a single episode. And I do the hard thing of having different casts each time because so many of my friends want to play. And I thought it's the best way to get several people involved rather than have a single cast through multiple episodes. But it's a lot more work, but it's worth it.
You are brave. You are brave. That's crazy.
I'm not brave. I'm nuts. I'm nuts.
I was trying to be polite.
I recognize that you have to be a certain kind of crazy to be able to be that dedicated to make a thing happen. And luckily, that fits within my neurodivergence.
Well, just for people who haven't listened to the show that you've been on previously, you're talking a lot about events and running games. You have a background. You have run a lot of events and run games and live play stuff. So maybe just quickly touch on some of the stuff you've done.
Well, I've been a LARPer for 25 years. 2025 actually would be the 25th year because I started LARPing in 2000. I used to be a producer for a large masquerade ball called the Labyrinth of Jareth Masquerade, a huge masquerade ball in Los Angeles. I've also been a narrative designer for Dungeons and Dragons. When the pandemic hit, we designed reality RP. So I ended up casting all of the people that you saw in that game and even gave them character coaching because they were using canon characters. I also did a couple of live events. I did the Malibu Daydream Experience, which was based on the Barbie movie. It was not official, but it was an interactive experience at San Diego Comic-Con. And I also just ran the Taskmaster LA Champion of Champions at WonderCon. So I have a long line of live event production. And especially I had been the designer for the interaction for the Four Empires, which is a game that's played across multiple conventions: Anime Pasadena, Anime Riverside, and Anime Las Vegas. So that involved people coming into convention, giving them quests, and then having them fight on a very large risk type battle map.
Very cool. So people who want to hear stories about all that, go back and search through the archive for the previous episode because you talk about a lot of those and you share lots of stories. So that's cool. But today we're here to talk about what you learned from doing Taskmaster LA. Taskmaster LA. Oh, I'm gonna mangle that all day. Okay.
That's okay. So have I.
But let's start. The thing that really jumped out at me is you were talking earlier about playtesting. And when you're talking about other types of game design, playtesting is a huge deal. People are constantly talking about how do we get better at playtesting? How do we playtest for what we want? How do we playtest properly or intelligently? So let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
In talking with you about this, you said you were testing not just for balance and fairness, but also testing for entertainment. Is this going to be watchable or readable or listen? Like, how is it going to broadcast? So tell me, how did that work in? How did that affect your process? What were you looking for in playtesting?
So with Taskmaster, they have all sorts of challenges. So everything from physical challenges, artistic challenges, mental challenges. And for YouTube, which you could find a lot of Taskmaster. So if you go to Taskmaster on the YouTube channel, you could see all of their episodes there. I realized that for my version of Taskmaster, and since you only have casts that are only there to do a few different challenges for the whole show, the challenges needed to be immediately readable on camera, or they had to look interesting. So if you think about when you make a thumbnail for your YouTube video, it has to immediately tell you a lot of information, or it has to arrest you from scrolling and go, oh, what's that? So it had to look visually interesting to get you to go, what's that? And click on it. So it's not meant to be necessarily clickbait. That's not like the point. The point is that it has to be just visually appealing. Right. Why would people stop scrolling and watch it? And that usually means that there's a lot of props. And that's often inspired by going to the dollar store or thrift shop. And so fun fact, Eric, my producer, bought these mugs from a store that was closing, and they were these graduation mugs that said 1 degree hotter, and they had these graduation caps on top, and that became a challenge. The challenge was make the water in this mug 1 degree hotter. And that's actually one of the first challenges that we had in our first episode. And sometimes the tests are just inspired by random stuff that you find in the store. And it also makes the producers become even more creative because we don't always have to feel stuck about what challenges we need to make. Right. You could just go to a thrift shop, the 99-cent store, Dollar Tree, any of these cheap places, and you could find challenges all day long.
That means. So when you come up with a challenge, was there a process or a way for you to know, hey, this is going to be entertaining and work well? Or is it more just trust your gut? You've done enough, entertainment work that you know what's going to work?
It's a combination of both. So sometimes you'll find an item that will inspire you to make a thing. So I think about like one of the challenges that we just recently had for a Champion of Champions. We had a Jenga tower of stacked blocks, and people would walk in and think, it's going to be a Jenga challenge. But the challenge was actually make a dice tower out of these. And it had the complication of you must roll a 15 and above. If you roll below a 15, the Taskmaster assistant will take one block away from your structure. And so when you put all of that mischievousness together, that just makes for a fun challenge. Another challenge that we didn't even need to play test, but we knew was going to be a good challenge, was that my Taskmaster assistant, Ruben Bressler, another contestant asked him in a previous challenge, what are you not good at? And he says, I'm not good at dancing. So immediately I wanted to make a challenge about teaching Ruben how to dance. And I had to ask Ruben, is this okay? And he's a performer, so he's good with it. So I didn't need to try to figure that out, because the story is teach someone how to dance who thinks he's not good at it. And that's already intriguing and high potential for comedy, regardless of how that turns out. There is one thing that I always look for, though. In a playtest, what I'm looking for is, did the playtesters have a strong reaction? Did they enjoy the challenge? Was it fun? Or did they feel like they achieved something? Or were they frustrated, but they get it and were curious to see what other people did? It's almost like reality TV. If it invokes a reaction, that is a good challenge. If the reaction was, it's all right, then that's not a good challenge, because you could always do something to make it more interesting.
So you do go into playtesting with something very specific that you're looking for. It's a type of reaction that you're keeping an eye out for and watching for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how would you take what you've learned from this and start to apply to tabletop game design? Maybe something that could be applicable to video game design, even, or narrative design in digital games. Is there something in there that might be transferable?
Yeah. So let's start off with, I guess, a trend that I'm seeing right now in actual plays and TTRPGs, and using that, I'll be able to give my critique. So with Taskmaster LA, I mentioned the entire process. And so I have to design more for a live audience than for a YouTube audience, because we have a live aspect. And what's great is that we have immediate feedback on what's funny. Like, that is such great feedback. And it's also a huge advantage, because if it's funny in real life, it's going to translate to YouTube, especially since you have a real life laugh track. And it's something that I'm seeing in TTRPGs and actual plays right now. There seems to be less responsiveness to streamed shows and more emphasis on live shows, like 20-Sided Tavern is a huge success. I'm also seeing more live plays, especially at convention live plays. And I've attended TTRPG live plays, and because I want to figure out what makes this work. And part of it is just you're there, you're feeling the energy, and the reactions are immediate. And sometimes the players acknowledge the audience. You can't do that when you're doing this through a video. And what's interesting is that it's like a version of improv, which people understand, but the structure is an actual play. So this is not a far leap for people who don't know the D&D or a actual play format. Just think of it as it's an improv show, but you're all sitting at a table, and that's where the comedy is, and that's where the story is. So this might be a call out, but how this might apply to digital games is remembering there's an audience.
Right.
Often my complaint with some digital stream games, especially actual plays, is the feeling that everyone is here to watch us, not we are performing for an audience. And my God, it's like, do you not understand that this is what it is? Because here's the thing. If I'm watching your game for 2 to 3 hours, why am I choosing to do that over watching a movie, watching a comedy on Netflix, watching Taskmaster? Because that's a lot of time to watch something and not be playing a game. You know, people think they're just competing with only other digital streamed games, but they're really competing with all forms of entertainment. So you have to think about what makes it stand out. And for me, what really sells me, if I'm going to have to spend my time watching it, is not always who's playing. People think, oh, if I have a high profile people who are famous on TikTok, famous on Instagram, people are going to watch it. And that's a whole different conversation on Geek Fame. And doesn't always translate.
Right.
The thing that always gets me is, what's the story? What is the story? You know, like just like this podcast. What's the story? You know, TTRPGs and digital games are all about stories and worlds I can interact with. You know, this is not Connect 4 where you're selling me on the mechanics.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a sports game where I see two teams locked into competition because, you know, sports ball, that's the story. We know that's the story. And, you know, not to be cruel, but we're a bunch of friends in a tavern. I'm not going to watch that for 2 hours.
Right.
Right. But here's a high-pitched concept that I have actually run in games. So one of the actual plays that I ran was called Poison Tulips. And the concept was tabloid bards in a 5e game. So just using that concept alone, it just sold the concept. Like, these bards, you know, work for a tabloid. But then I pushed that concept further. So the story was, you are all journalists for a gossip rag in the Duchy of Scandalabra. And you realize that the new Duchess has shut down independent press and has a state press. And you are a tabloid and you're not dealing with politics, so you get to exist. And the game starts with my players and I acting as anchors in a newsroom, and we actually report to the audience before the game even starts. And so I always try to think of, what do you make that someone else is gonna look at and go, I want to watch that. And you have to kind of think of that because that log line or that pitch or that image intrigued them. And I feel like more digital games would benefit from understanding the play to the audience, not just the play among themselves.
Cool. That's a cool pitch. I like that. That's wild. I'm going to take you for a little. I want you to come with me for a little ride for a second. I'm going to make you use your brain muscles for a bit here.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious. If you were to take this concept and these learnings about story and about making sure that a game has something that's entertaining, and apply it to video games that are being played on, let's say, Twitch, like live played, what do you think? And this is speculation only. I'm just curious about your opinion. What do you think would be crucial to tell a game designer who wants to make a game that's going to be played well on Twitch, become entertaining on Twitch? Are there considerations there?
So, interestingly, I wouldn't worry so much about the creator of a video game trying to make it appealing to Twitch, because what happens is that it would be up to the personality to make it interesting with the interaction. They just need to make a solid game which will evoke a reaction. And with the person who's playing, if I'm watching Twitch, it's because I'm watching the creator, I'm watching the streamer play. And maybe a little bit of watching how that game plays. Because if I want to play the game, I just play it myself. If I want to get a sample of the game, then I'll watch maybe a streamer, play a sample of it, maybe. But really, I'm going to be looking at a YouTube video, what does a preview look like? If I'm watching a personality, it's because the personality is engaging. And that personality is engaging because of their reactions, their sometimes when they react to something, they're thinking the same thing I'm thinking, or maybe they're thinking something that is way different from what I'm thinking, but they're able to articulate and communicate the audience and make them realize that the audience is important. So I wouldn't tell a game designer, make it for a streamed audience, make a solid game that someone else wants to play and someone else might want to buy that game as a result of their demonstration.
Brilliant. Good answer, man. Good answer. Okay, well, speaking of personalities and people, another part of the process of Taskmaster LA is casting. And you're looking for people who not only are going to play well and be good on camera and perform well, but also are engaging and creative. How did you go about casting these people? And how did the casting process affect your design process?
Oh, that's a great question. So the answer is the casting is very, very critical before I even design challenges. And there's a reason why. So, for example, I had Johnny Stanton, who is an NFL football player turned game master. So I'm not going to put a football challenge where he'll just decimate everyone else, right? I had a player who has dyscalculia, the learning disability associated with numbers. So I'm not going to put a math challenge in that episode.
Right.
So in a weird way, there are lines and veils with challenges because it's also important to understand what the players are too good at and what they cannot deal with. And if a player is allergic to peanuts, don't put peanuts in your game.
Yeah, I don't do it.
I feel like this sounds obvious, and I'm saying this because there are some game masters that are so insistent on putting those peanuts in game that they will remove players because, like, well, I really want the peanuts. Like, no, the players are more important than the challenges. You can come up with so many more challenges than the peanuts. Like you could even copy a challenge from Taskmaster. I will say that one time I did test that maybe having the challenge that someone was good at, but give them a time limit, and sometimes doesn't work. So I had a challenge where the contestants needed to make armor from a large roll of butcher paper. So it's a paper armor challenge. And I forgot or sort of remembered that one of my contestants was a costume designer. And I thought maybe it was like the short amount of time, like Project Runway, I could pronounce Runway, Project Runway. And they would freak out that the time would be too short. And it turns out it was too much of an advantage. And so I realized, okay, even if you think that they may not do well, if something is within their field, you might be giving them way too much of an advantage. Luckily, the other team was convinced of Vince Casso and Lamar the Con Guy, and those two are a comedy duo that were accidentally put together, but I'm so glad that they were, because now we have internet video of Vince Casso in paper diapers.
Oh, Vince. That's great.
Vince is my buddy. The guy is up for anything.
That's cool. But that feels like something that could be applicable to tabletop games, to homebrew sessions, to playing with your friends. It's session 0. Don't try and force something into a game that other people may be have issues with or cause, be aware of what the peanuts are. Like, you don't try and force a dark topic into a, dark game that your players may not want.
Exactly. And I've definitely eliminated at least one challenge that could not go up on air because of an issue that was missed. And it sucks. It sucks because that meant that was time and energy and props and performances that were spent. And I made the decision of this cannot air. And so I had to replace the challenge with something else. And it's because in the end, the performers are giving of their time to my show. And I'd never want people to look bad. They could look silly. Silly is great. If you're competing on Taskmaster, you have to understand that what you're in for. But I don't ever want people walking away from my show feeling bad.
Right.
Especially because it's a comedy show.
To pull it back to the topic of playtesting, did you catch that in playtesting, or were you already in post and editing, and then where the process was that?
So sometimes what would end up happening is it wouldn't happen at the playtest. It would happen during the video challenges.
Mm.
So, and it's not always bad, but you have to make a decision based on it. Like if it's something that really could be taken the wrong way, or if it's something that's not up to production quality standard, then you can eliminate it and also figure out something else that you can do. In fact, every time I've replaced a challenge, I've always told my contestants, I'm so sorry, replacing the challenge. Everyone was just excited to do another challenge. So it's never a bad thing. But one thing that can happen is you can play test for all the possibilities. And because my contestants are nerds, they will figure out something else that satisfies the challenge that we never thought of.
Yeah.
And so one recent example was at Taskmaster LA Champions at WonderCon. The challenge was we had laid in a set of alphabet play tile mats in a 5x5 bingo square. And the challenge was place 5 in a row. And the play mats had a few items on it to indicate that you couldn't just put an apple on the letter A or a box on the letter B. So you had to figure out what the rule was. So there was a trick to it, and one of the items happened to be a D20. So my contestant Carrie looked at the D20, changed it to a 5, placed it on the mat, and said, that is 5 in the row. We never picked it up on any play test, and when we showed that clip at WonderCon, the audience went wild.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Did you ever have a challenge that got caught in playtest that failed in playtest? Like, did that ever happen?
There was a challenge that failed in, oh my God. There was a challenge that failed in playtest because when we got the footage, and immediately had to shoot another set of Taskmaster videos, we accidentally erased one of the hard drives, which had critical parts of a challenge. So and it sucked because the challenge looked so good. And that process where we learned the hard way, buy more hard drives, label them, make sure that people are aware of these things. These things happen, and we'll never make that mistake again.
Well, you learn the hard way. Sometimes those are the lessons that stick around.
Exactly.
Very, very cool. It's so cool. I love it. This is such a cool project, dude.
Thank you.
I guess let's start bringing the core topic to an end. I guess if I was to look for a key takeaway for somebody who's designing experiences like you are, somebody who's designing digital games or interactive narrative of some sort, what's something you've learned that you would share with them? A piece of advice.
So I would share with them the standard entertainment. What is your 30-second elevator pitch when it comes to promoting things? If it's not interesting in 30 seconds, I'm not watching it for 3 hours. I say this again and again and again because it forces people to simplify their concepts and not to get too into the weeds about how perfect their mechanics are or how they must encapture every possibility or action. Because I've seen in some games or some game designers or some showmakers that get stuck on having perfect rules that no one sees or appreciates. You can trust your players to help you take you through a story if you don't have all the possibilities mapped out. And your story, when you're playing a game like this, is not just you writing the game. Otherwise, you'd be writing a book. Or otherwise, my performers, they'd just be reading a script. That's not what this is. This is a game.
Right. Okay, well, that's going to wrap that up. But I'm going to put you on the spot with an unexpected surprise question.
Surprise!
What was your favorite moment in the whole thing?
Oh, like I'm trying to think of. Okay, I'm trying to think of one, and it's a. All right, so my favorite moment. Okay, there's a couple of them. I think my favorite moment. I'm There's two, so I'll just have to see this both of them.
Please.
My favorite moment, unexpected moment, was finding out that one of my contestants was an actual knight.
That's cool.
We had no clue. The task was, oh God, I'm blanking out right now. Right now, what that task is because I'm just put on the spot. Um, but but one of my friends brought a medal that he had and explained about how the Queen of Sweden created knighthood. And I'm like, where is he going with this? And then we all pause and we're like, wait, you're an actual knight? And he goes, yes, I am been knighted in Sweden. And we're all like, oh my God, that was the time you revealed it on the show. That was amazing. The other one, which involved a little bit more of the audience, was finding out that at the end of Taskmaster LA at Champion of Champions, because there was a lot of chaos setting up the game, or when I mean setting up the game as in making sure that the audio worked, because we had to make sure that it was recordable for YouTube and all of that. And shout out to Joe, who had to do that in a short amount of time with a lot of pressure. So I had to vamp during that time. So we were short on time, and no one in the production actually kept track of the score for the entire game, but someone in the audience did. And other people were helping that audience member just tell us this is what the score was based on everything that they watched. And the most wonderful feeling was at the very end of the show. We realized we need to put this show back together because we had to move tables, we had to move chairs. And several people from the audience came up and pitched in, helped move the tables together, helped move the chairs together, helped clean up the trash. This was the end of the show, and no one had to do that. And then I remember like standing there with a bunch of people at either side of the table, just trying to make sure everything aligned. And I'm seeing a row of people, crew, contestants, audience, working together to clean up the show. And that was the coolest feeling in the world.
That's wild. That's one heck of a community, dude.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, that is the end of the core topic. Normally I have a philosophical question that I ask about the core of the show, but I've asked you it before, so I had to come up with a new one. So I cooked up one that's kind of applicable to what we've been talking about today, and I don't think I'll stump you, but it'll be fun. So here it is. What is it, in your opinion, what is it about watchable games that taps into our deeper need for shared storytelling?
Watchable games need to do one thing that's important. Someone in the audience should look at it and go, I can do that, because you want more people to play games. Games have a player participation element, and I don't know if that has to be deep. It just has to relate to people watching. It has to just relate to your audience.
Thanks. That's a good answer.
Thank you.
Good answer. All right, buddy. Well, we're starting to head for the door here. I do like to open up a little space close to the end here where you can signal boost. So tell us, where can we find Taskmaster LA? How can we support the show? Where can we find you online? What else have you got going on you want to talk about? This is your time, buddy.
All right. So you could find us on the YouTube channel Geek Public. So it's Geek Public, all one word. So the funny part when I learned about trademarks is we actually have the trademark for the name Geek Public as a channel. It is the most surreal thing in the world to be the owner of a combination of names, but there we go. And really, it's subscribing, liking, commenting on the videos helps a lot. We're actually hard to find because we don't name ourselves like Taskmaster LA. We're actually Geek Public because we do more than just Taskmaster LA. We do a lot of discussion topics and information shows, and we have other things that are coming up. And also keep in mind, the first episode is very different from where we are now. So over time, we just got better and better, or I learned more about editing. We learned things like get mics for your contestants. Also, we got better cameras. We had more crew, like there were so many things that we improved each time. So if you look at episode 1 and you think, oh God, this is horrible, it's like, please look at the more recent episodes. The most recent episode I'm pretty proud of. The only issue or problem that happened was I released the episode the same week the official Taskmaster released episode 1 of the new series 9. I'm like 19, and I went, no, oh no, that's horrible timing. But again, it supports Taskmaster, and I love that show, and more people should watch that show. Right now, I'm also preparing for a Vampire the Masquerade LARP called Darkness Emergent Los Angeles. And I'm making a series of 1-minute videos that I'm releasing on Instagram under my name, Ryan Omega, as the character Father Jojo, a Salubri Filipino Catholic priest who's the Baron of Pasadena. And the premise is that I'm actually giving people LARP advice on how to interact with people, especially if you are feeling anxious or new. Again, I've been LARPing for 25 years, and I didn't want to just put a camera on me and go, hey, come join me at Darkness Emergent. I want to do something more meaningful. And so the first one is, what do you wear to an event like this? The second is, how do you start a conversation with someone if you're not sure what to say? And then another one is, how do you play vampire politics? And really, it's how do you feel useful when you're not sure what to do? So I give you a lot of options in 1 minute. So the fact that I actually compress all of this, I'm very proud of that. And
Very cool.
And I made these videos because I want to help other people like get into these activities, into LARP, and feel comfortable interacting with people, because I hope that someday I might be able to role play with them.
Well, that's cool. That's very cool. I can't wait to see that. And I've seen the Instagram, the first one. So yeah, I will put the links to all of this in the show notes and in the description and all that, so people can click through and find it. But go check it all out, guys. That's it. I'm going to start pushing you out the door. I like to give the last word. So as we head out the door, do you have any parting words of wisdom? It could be about life in general, or it could be specific to Storycraft and games. It's up to you.
All right, so I thought about this, and I know this discussion has been about making games as shows with performance, but I want to encourage people to play games for joy more than performance. Not every role-playing game has to be watched by an audience to be a legitimate story or experience. Not every tale has to be perfectly told to stay in the warmth of your soul. If you and your friends remember that dice roll or decision that got you into trouble, and you muddled your way out of it and laugh about it years later, that is more victory than any view count you will ever have.
And that wraps up another episode of The Corner of Story and Game. A huge thank you to Ryan for giving us a behind-the-scenes look at how to design for delight, not just function. And to you, dear listener, as always, thank you for taking your seat at the table. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to follow the podcast on your platform of choice, leave a review or a comment, and hey, come join us over on Discord and get in on the conversation. Until next time, keep telling stories, playing games, and creating worlds worth getting lost in. Stay safe out there, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the Corner of Story and Game.